Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Bradford has just finished his assessment of what's going on in the Greater Toronto Area, and specifically Toronto, in regards to housing. So I'd like to add a few of my own thoughts, if I could, to this issue, because I do think it is the issue of this year, if not of the next couple of years. And I think it's only getting worse. And I don't think that politicians, even though they've given it a lot of lip service, have really come to terms with the problem. And I do think that the American election last week is instructive, and we should learn from that lesson. Clearly inflation was an issue. I think inflation has been brought under control in Canada and the United States. Clearly, the American electorate didn't realize it, didn't recognize it. And in reality, even though the rate of increase has slowed down dramatically, prices are still 20-25% higher than they were a couple of years ago. And that's what you notice. And so therefore, year over year inflation is not something that you notice as much as sort of, this year over a couple of years inflation, which is still obviously very bad, though it's ceased going up at outrageous rates. And I also think it's global because of the pandemic, supply chain issues, et cetera, and low interest rates that were everywhere across the world. And so I don't think there's that much one can do other than what the central bank has been doing. So I don't think inflation is the issue that the current government's got to attack. I think that energy prices might be, and that could be a whole nother show. But housing affordability, I think, is a massive issue. And it is something that we're not doing right, because we really are a generation, my generation, that's leaving our next generation in a far poorer economic situation, where they just don't have that dream anymore, or they may have the dream, but they can't accomplish that dream of a house, because we have dramatically constrained supply, and we've bid up pricing, and it is out of reach of the vast majority of people, and I think that's just absolutely wrong. So let's go through the reasons why and what we can do about it. I think that the supply has been, as I said, dramatically reduced from what it could and should be. We've restricted supply. And so we got to think about why and who it is that's restricted the supply. The statistics are that we're building the same number of housing units today that we did in the 1970s or 80s, when the population has doubled. So clearly something has gone wrong. What's gone wrong? I think, and why and how? I think that it is, number one, that we have regulated the profit out of housing to a large extent. And we've done that through the massive increase in development fees, where development fees have gone up by, people say, 10 or more fold, 1,000% increases, where they used to be, less than 10,000, and they're now over 100,000, 130,000 in some ways. And it's nowhere near what, the original principle was, which was growth pays for growth. And there are other models in other, municipalities, other countries, other jurisdictions that make a lot of sense, where you have municipal tax bonds that will finance water and sewage and other things, and infrastructure. What we do is we make newcomers to our communities pay for all the growth that all the infrastructure that growth demands, and more than that, because we've built up these massive cash reserves that haven't been spent on the growth, proving that development fees are outlandish relative to what we actually need. And I think it is the problem that it's the voters that don't live here yet that we're harming. And so because they don't have a vote, we can harm them, and we save the property taxes on the current voters. And so it's a bad system that I think weak municipal politicians have allowed to continue. And it's got to change, because when 30% of the cost of a house goes to taxes and development fees, we know something's wrong. The average developer makes somewhere between 10 and 20% of the cost of development and profit. And that's after everyone else gets paid at the end if they're successful. And government takes more than that, 30% upfront. There's something wrong in this. And it obviously has stymied supply. But in addition, the regulation and the red tape and the time that it takes to get approval, I think, is equally bad. And as I've said a couple of times, I've been involved in numerous different industries in my career, from the beer industry to the entertainment industry to the pharmaceutical industry, to several other biotech, green tech, hardware, retail, etc. I've never found the degree of regulation in any other industry other than maybe pharmaceuticals. And even in pharmaceuticals, you did a big test, and the FDA or the Health Canada said yes or no on the test, and maybe they'd have some influence on the warning label that you had to affix to each pharmaceutical product. But they didn't tell you how many bike spots, how many car spots, how many feet of amenity space, what the type of windows and the type of cladding and the type of, the 18 or 24 different committees that you've got to take your development proposal through. We have regulated the heck out of the real estate business as if developers don't have any idea what's the right thing to build. The market has no positive influence, and regulators, city planners, city councilors need to tell developers, builders what they should do. It's wrong. The market can tell builders, developers what should be built. City councilors should not have, city planners should not have the degree of influence, control, and be this time sap for development that they are. Stats Canada did an analysis that said that Canada was the slowest country in the Western world for development, and Toronto, Mississauga, Vancouver, and Victoria were the worst cities, the slowest cities for that. So I think that we need to, number one, attack costs, and that's reducing development fees dramatically, reducing taxes from this 30%, reduce red tape and regulation, and reduce the time. And I think we've got to do that now. I think we have to increase the supply, and price cost will do that to a certain extent. But I think in addition, we need more land. And I think that, this argument that we've had in regards to the Greenbelt is important. In London, England, they built this green belt around London, but then they put in really good transit, fast trains to municipalities on the other side of the green belt, such that people could build the single family homes that they wanted and still, in a reasonable length of time, get into the city of London. And I was over in London this summer. My friends came in to visit me, and they came in from the cities on the other side of the Greenbelt, and were in reasonable time. That said, more and more of them want to move to the city of London because of the time it takes to get to jobs, and you can't get across London. And the crosstown, which is now, I think, the Elizabeth line, has been a couple $1 billion investment in trying to get across the town, and it has worked out spectacularly. The environmental priorities and objectives of the Greenbelt were right. But what it's done, and we have to understand this and acknowledge it, what it's done is restricted the land dramatically that is available for single-family homes. We have robbed our next generation of the opportunity to have a single-family home, a backyard, a pool, a picket fence, etc., within a reasonable cost relative to income, because of the issues we've already talked about, but also because of the establishment of this greenbelt. Natural market forces would have allowed some of that greenbelt to be used for housing. And I'm not saying all of that greenbelt should be turned to housing, but I do believe very strongly that we need more single-family home land made available within a reasonable commute distance to downtown Toronto. And so we've got to confront that. And why is it that we can tell a whole generation of people they don't deserve a single family home? They've got to live in a 500 square foot shoebox in the sky and raise their kids there. I don't think that's right. And so this attitude that we've had about dramatically limiting the availability of land has had a significant negative impact. And if we're not going to do that, then we're going to have to do something to make more homes that are currently available. We're not going to do that. We're not going to kick older people out of their homes. And so, we've got to think this through and realize that our our environmental priorities have harmed our kids dramatically. And is that what we really want? And do we really believe that this farmland that we're saving cannot be made more productive in other areas? That it's that sacred that it has to be protected forever and not made available for our kids to enjoy a single family home, and that they've got to live in a shoebox? I don't know. I think it's something we got to talk about. I think we had conservation areas, we had national parks, we had provincial parks. Those were all right. But telling a private landowner that he can no longer sell his land for highest and best use, he's got to leave it agricultural. I'm not sure that's democratic. I don't believe that's freedom. I think, in that kind of situation, frankly, if we wanted it that badly, the government should have been forced to expropriate the land and pay market prices for it. And clearly we weren't willing to do that. And so that tells you something, that maybe it was wrong. I think that if we are going to have the green belt, then we have to make the single family homeland available on the other side of the green belt. And the only way that works is if we've got highways built to that area and fast trains so they can get to jobs, or we somehow incentivize dramatically the employment to move to that area. And we haven't thought that through. And I think that the other thing is that we do have this issue with the missing middle that lots of people have talked about being very difficult to get approval for the missing middle. I have been out looking for a bungalow, a 2 or 3 bedroom house. It's almost impossible to find. All the real estate agents want, all the developers are trying to, force you to build these 4-bedroom homes because that's what the average market wants, even if not that many of us have that number of people that will fill the 4 bedrooms anymore. But that's sort of the market. And so finding a place where a empty nester can move with a bungalow and less than 4 bedrooms is very challenging. And this missing middle doesn't exist unless you're willing to move into a small townhouse or a condo. And so I do think that we have to open up the zoning that allows the development of other options. And I think right now, as Ron Butler talked about the other day, we've got this huge inventory of really small condos that are depreciating the market fairly dramatically and are going to make it very difficult for developers to get sales, to get financing, to get the money to make new developments, to initiate new developments. So we got to kickstart the housing market somehow. And I think there's 3 ways that we can do that. Number one, I think we can have zero development fees up to a certain amount. Call it $1 million value, either in rental stock or in condo stock, maybe $1.5 million. And just say for the next 2 years, 3 years, no development fees, zero. So start building. Second is a density bonus. Give developers a 50% or a 30% increase in the density they otherwise had approved if they start in the next 12 months. And then I think for social housing, for more affordable housing, governments have got to be prepared to contribute land for free into private-public partnerships. I think that's the only way that we're going to incentivize the building of reasonable family-sized homes within the 416, or even, frankly, the close in 905. I think we've got to kickstart what's going on. It's interesting. I was in the United States 2 weeks ago. I went to Florida, and everyone there in the real estate business is talking about Florida Live program that Ron DeSantis, the government, has put in place. He's a progressive politician, a right-wing politician that's got some progressive proposals that would make some left-wing politicians in Canada embarrassed. He has given a 75% reduction in property taxes forever for people that build housing that is of a certain size, and it attains a rental rate that's 80% of the market, 80% or less of the market rent, affordable housing. Huge incentive. A huge incentive for developers to build this rental stock that is going to be available, and lots of developers are developing it. I went to Texas, and rents in Austin and Dallas are down and becoming more affordable. because the cities there have put in place policies for a reasonably dramatic increase in supply. And we're not talking Houston, where there's no zoning regulation at all. We're talking Dallas and Austin, where there is regulation and review, but they're doing it quickly and they're doing it reasonably. And their development fees are less than $10,000 when ours are over $100,000. So it can be done. I was in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a town size of Mississauga in the Midwest. Rental rates there were 20 to 30% of what they are in Mississauga and Toronto. Great city. Why is it that other places can get this issue right and we can't? I'm going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. As I've said, I think that this housing crisis that we're in is really the issue for now. Inflation may have been last year's issue. COVID was 2 years ago issue. Climate change may be the issue of our generation. But housing affordability, I think, is the issue for right now that we've got to deal with. And it's not just in Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, it's in Vancouver and Victoria as well. It's in Montreal to a certain extent. And it has been underappreciated by our politicians. It has been neglected. And part of it is because the people that are hurt are the people that don't vote. Number one, because they're young. Number two, because they're often renters that don't vote. Number three, it's because the people that don't live here yet. They're going to move here. They want to move here, but they're not here yet. So they don't vote. And so therefore, I worry that the politicians have had this incentive, or they haven't had the incentive to do what's right for our future population. They're only worried about the current population, and frankly, at times, only the current population that votes, which with 30 to 25 to 35% turnout tend to be older people that own homes rather than younger people that don't own homes or rent. And I think that we need to have our municipal politicians particularly start to pay attention to what's the right thing to do for their entire population, not just for the people that voted for them. And the right thing to do is to build more housing, to get housing prices down, to make housing more affordable, and to be able to build in our society, not just small condominiums or apartment buildings, which I think we need, particularly in density around transit stations, but we need to build duplexes and townhouses and missing middle, and yes, single-family homes. And we're not building single-family homes in Toronto anymore because most, if not all, the land is used up. The Greenbelt, our lack of investment in transit, our lack of investment in highways, admit it, people, has made land less available, accessible, more expensive. And so therefore we haven't been building those homes, and we've robbed our children of the Canadian dream of home ownership. And home ownership is more than just a place to live. All the statistics will tell you once people have ownership of a home, they have pride in their home, they get more involved in the community, they do a better job of raising a family, of contributing to society, more security, continuity. What are we doing? We're clearly doing something wrong, and we haven't come to that recognition and realization. And our politicians, I don't know, they're living in somewhere land, jacking up development fees by 1,000%, adding more red tape and regulation, delaying approvals, and adding in red tape such that it's 3 times as long, twice to 3 times as long to get a development approved as it is to build it. We need dramatic change. We need to provide a boost to this building industry. We need to get housing supply up dramatically so that prices come down and we make housing more affordable. I hope some of these politicians finally get it. And if they don't, I hope the electorate rises up, like frankly they did in the United States election, and tells people it's the economy, stupid. Let's get housing affordable again. Thanks. Good night, everybody.